We brought on an expert to do that. He's the mayor of Delano, which is in Central California, and he's running for Congress now, United States Congress in 21st District, which of course Delano is in. His name is Brian Osorio. Brian, welcome to TYT.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
No problem. So I want to get into your story in a second. You're 25 and you're the mayor of a city already. I read your background, first to graduate from high school in your family, first to graduate from college, went to Berkeley. It's an amazing story. But I want to talk about Central California. I don't understand why the 21st District, I'm being literal about this, largely votes for Democrats for president. Not always, but largely. But usually votes for Republicans in Congress. Why?
I would say there are a number of factors that play into this. I think the first one is that we historically have a low voter turnout. In our last midterm election in 2018, the lowest voter turnout was, I believe, 29%, and in CD21 it was 32%. And so there is some discrepancy in the number of people who vote for president, and then the number of people who vote for Congress. And so, I'll get into it in a bit, but I believe that we need a candidate that excites our population, our constituents in this area, and we just haven't had that yet.
Yeah, I mean, Central California is where labor rights, in a lot of ways, if it didn't start, and it's probably not fair to say that it started there, but it certainly was one of the most important areas for labor rights in American history. Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, etc. And so these legends come from Central California, and yes, there's a heavy Latino American population in Central California, yet it elects some of the most conservative people in the whole country. Devin Nunes is from Central California. In fact, he was from this district earlier. He was a congressman from this district, yours earlier. Kevin McCarthy's in a neighboring district. So voter turnout clearly explains part of it, but is there like this really old school conservative portion? There must be, right? So who are they? Who are the conservatives in this area?
So I would say it's a fascinating point and something that I love to get into with people. So oftentimes we have conservative Democrats who are running for higher office here, whether it's for Congress or whether it's for a state seat. And so there is a lack of options when it comes to representing a Democrat that really represents the needs of the community. And so when you look at the records of who's holding office in this area, you clearly see that there's a conservative bias towards these elected officials. And so, when you trace the money, you can make some of your assumptions yourself. But these are leaders, like you mentioned, or elected officials like Devin Nunes to the north of us, and then Kevin McCarthy to the south of us, and in this district, Congressman Valadeo. These are some of the big power players in the nation, and again, you can already imagine the influence of big ag, of the oil and gas industry, and these other corporations in the area.
Of course, the money's going to go to the conservative folks because of agriculture, giant companies involved, etc. It's just a shame that it works that they convince enough folks to either stay home or to vote for the conservative candidates. Okay, so you on the other hand are very progressive. And so how long have you been mayor of Delano?
So I've been elected council member for now 2.5 years, but this coincides with my appointment this past December, where 2 other council members who consider themselves progressive appointed or led the appointment of my unanimous mayorship.
Okay, and you on the other hand did very progressive policies in terms of stopping people's utility bills during the pandemic, talking about LGBTQ rights and etc. And so if the area population was truly conservative, they would have rebelled. So what kind of rebellion have you faced?
Quite a bit. And that's the thing that I take into consideration when I'm at these council meetings or at these public events, when there is this conservative perspective on things I do. But at the end of the day, I remember that I'm advocating for marginalized communities and people who have been underrepresented in the city of Delano and, of course, in the surrounding areas. I think the argument is often like, why are we making these social arguments when we're considering policy? But what we have to consider that, in the times we're in the past couple of years, social justice has been the forefront of policy making, or the most considerate and equitable policy making. And that's the type of policy making I want to bring here to Delano. And when you really walk people through that reasoning, they start to understand you, because oftentimes it's not that clear. And in an area where we define it to be sometimes socially conservative, we don't talk about why Black Lives Matter. We don't talk about how Black and Latinos are disproportionately lacking access to healthcare. And so people don't want to make it a race thing, as they say, but really it's in the numbers. And so I just want to bring in equitable policymaking to the forefront, right. And having those hard conversations are very important in an area where they don't happen often.
So Brian, this could be a microcosm of what's happening in the country, because Trump won a bigger percentage of the Latino vote than people expected. And so there's the dichotomy that Latinos are considered minorities in America, but a lot of Latinos are socially conservative and tend to be a higher percentage of religious folks, right? So how does that play out in your district? Is there a higher percentage of Latinos voting for Republicans, or no, not really? And how does that juxtaposition with the socially conservative, but in the context of America and the minority camp, how does that play out in your area?
Definitely, I would say I would need to do more research into how that split up is in terms of Latinos voting for which candidate. I will say that I think you're defining it clearly, that there is this sometimes misconception that Latinos will vote blue all the time, as we have seen, whether it was Trump, whether it was Romney or Bush. There's always going to be this fraction of Latinos who will vote for Republicans. That said, Latinos want a fighter for them, and it's how you come up across in whatever election it may be. They want someone who's going to advocate and really put in the work for them. And so I think it has to do a lot with messaging, but also someone with the track record of doing so. And that's what I'm going to be doing on this campaign trail, and just showing the people that it's not a matter of red or blue, but it's someone who's really going to be listening to the constituents' needs and will fight for them in Congress.
So TJ Cox was the Democratic congressman who just lost this time around, and we don't know if he's going to run again or not. So why not TJ Cox? Why are you in the race as opposed to TJ Cox?
Very good question. So transparently, I supported TJ this past election because our district benefits from having a Democrat with closely aligned values of the district. However, the reason why I'm running is because my story is a story of the Central Valley. I'm the son of Mexican immigrants. I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school and in college. And we need someone who can take this story to Washington. I will run as a progressive candidate, championing Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, and immigration reform. And we really haven't seen that message in this district or even across the Central Valley.
Okay, and it's so sorry for Congress.com, by the way. We'll have the links down below if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook. And there they are right there. So Brian, how would you increase voter turnout? Because that seems to be the #1 problem, as we talked about earlier, in terms of getting Democrats to win in that district.
Yeah, so first of all, it starts with the groundwork that many groups are trying to do now, which is focus on voter registration early on, but also educating people how to vote. A few moments ago, I talked about being the first in my family to do multiple things. And oftentimes as sons and daughters of immigrants, we are the first in our families to vote. And so it's really having those one-on-one conversations, but also these community meetings that are done in organizing to really push that message across, which is your vote truly matters. And these past 2 elections in CD21, we've seen that, where TJ Cox won his election by around 800 votes, and then this past election lost by under 2,000 votes. And so it starts with the ground game in organizing our communities to recognize the importance of voting. But two, it's about putting forth a candidate that really embodies the policies that will help this community. And so that's really, a part of this whole campaign is offering people a different choice, offering them a progressive choice. And that's something that resonated with the people of this district when they voted heavily for Bernie Sanders in 2020. He won in each of the 4 counties here. And so those would be the 2 things that I think will really increase voter turnout.
Yeah, so there have been some areas where voter turnout has been an issue with Latinos, and we just talked about how 21st District is one of those areas. So what is it? Why would Latinos turn out less than the average voter?
Well, there's a number of things, whether it's cultural, whether it's socioeconomic status. I can talk about these things in more depth, but culturally, when we talk about where some of these Latinos come from, whether they're immigrants themselves or children of immigrants, when we talk about whether it's from Mexico, where they've come from corrupt governments, where they become disillusioned with the political process, that's been one of the reasons cited to me when I'm having these conversations with residents. And then two, when again talking with children of immigrant Latinos, they think about I wasn't told about the importance of this very early on, and so I think it starts with changing the culture. But again, getting to them very early on and making sure they understand the importance of voting, because it's very, very hard to communicate that at times, and especially when people are just coming to you around election time saying like, hey, register to vote, but vote for me. I think there has to be some genuine intentions behind why we're registering people to vote. Because while I'm running for Congress, it's also about how do we build a bench for these other state races and local races where the impact can be seen, as I've been trying to do here at the local level.
All right, Brian, real quick before we run out of time. Look, I'm not covering your policies that much here because you're clearly very progressive, and people can find out more by going to OsorioForCongress.com. So I'm just curious. I mean, you went to Berkeley, you're really successful. Why politics?
So I wasn't born into politics. As I mentioned, I'm the son of immigrants who really try to keep their head down and just put in the work with the limited opportunities that they've had. But the reason why I think that we need to be involved in politics is because if we don't, politics will get involved with us, and they will make the decisions without people who center equity above everything. And seeing this in my studies at Berkeley, and I just graduated from USC a couple of weeks ago with a master's in public policy, it's very important that we have more people championing social justice when they're making decisions for communities, especially in marginalized communities that we see across the Central Valley. We often think of California as being this very progressive state, but as you clearly understand, that's not the case in the Central Valley. And we need to do more of championing people's values and also meeting them where they're at. And that's why I've decided to, pursue politics early on.
All right, I love it, and you're right. That's the place, for better or for worse, where you can have the most impact. And you're right, California voters are very progressive, but our politicians oftentimes are not at all. Dianne Feinstein is deeply conservative, preposterously conservative for California. Well, here's Brian Osorio running as a strong progressive in the 21st District. So Brian, thank you for joining us, appreciate it.
No, thank you again for having me.
No problem. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat, emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.